right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Schreiner. I am the Dean of FIU College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts, which is the home of our Department of Journalism and Media. I want to welcome everyone this afternoon to the Role of the Media in Contemporary Society, a conversation with Ramon Escobar. Ramon is a Senior Vice President of Talent, Recruitment, and Development for CNN Worldwide. He is responsible for the recruitment of all on and off-air talent for CNN US, CNN International, CNN in Espanol, and HLN, Headline News. He also advances talent recruitment and development since 2012. He also serves as the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for CNN Worldwide from January 2017 to June 2019, and continues to play a vital role in diversity and inclusion efforts for Warner Media News and Sports, the parent company of CNN. Ramon came to CNN after several years at Telemundo, most recently as Executive Vice President of Network News, overseeing the entire news division, including all international news bureaus and the development of on-air talent. While at Telemundo, his other roles included Senior Executive Vice President of Entertainment and Senior Vice President of News and Creative Services. Previously, Mr. Escobar served in a management position as Vice President at MSNBC, in charge of all live news programming. He was also Vice President and News Director of NBC's owned and operated station right here in Miami, WTVJ, and got his start in television as a producer at Univision's owned and operated stations in New York, WXTV. In addition to his executive work, Mr. Escobar has served as mentor, teaching at several classes, as a visiting faculty member at the Poynter Institute for Media Studies, and also right here at Florida International University. He is also a lifetime member of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And on a personal note, he is a close friend and chairs the advisory board of the Dean's Leadership Advisory Board for the School of Communication and Journalism, again here at FIU. So on behalf of all of us at FIU, Ramon, welcome. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you my friend and colleague who is co-hosting this event with us this afternoon, Dr. John Stack. John is a professor and founding dean of the Steven J. Green School of International and Public Affairs, or SIPA. Dr. Stack.
Thank you, Brian. I'm thrilled to be here with you and our distinguished guest. On behalf of the Green School, I am delighted to welcome everyone to our third installment of this compelling series. We are proud to join with the School of Communication and Journalism to host these conversations with leading figures in journalism and the media. The media plays a critical role in democracy. An independent press is essential for the sustainability of a free society. The ability of journalists to report freely on all matters of public concern creates an essential dialogue that engenders transparency. We have seen time and again throughout history and across the globe how a free press often becomes the first casualty of authoritarianism. Over the past decade, there has been an alarming deterioration of media freedom around the world that coincides with a steady erosion of democratic values worldwide. For this reason, the Green School is committed to programming that explores the essential role of the media in building a more just, peaceful, and prosperous world. I want to briefly acknowledge the Green family, whose support helps make today's event possible through our Dorothea Green Lecture Series. We are so grateful to Ambassador Green, his wife Dorothea, and his daughter Kimberly Green. And now I'd like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, our senior fellow, David Kramer.
Well, Dean Stack, thanks very much. And Dean Schreiner, thank you for joining forces once again for this, our third in this, I think, really important and interesting series that we have. We had Marty Barron for the first session, the recently retired executive editor of the Washington Post. And then we had Monica Richardson, the new executive editor of the Miami Herald. And today, as Dean Schreiner said and introduced, we're very fortunate to have Ramon Escobar, the senior vice president at CNN for recruitment and development. And Ramon, welcome to you. And I think if we can, let's get started right away. I should let our viewers know the reason you see things moving behind Ramon is he's on a train. And so we're going to make the best of the contact and connection. No, you could leave the curtain open, that's fine. So Ramon, let's jump right in. And if you can describe what exactly does the Senior Vice President for Talent Recruitment and Development do at CNN?
Well, first of all, just say thank you to FIU.
Let's see here, Ramon. I don't know if you're maybe turn off the video and see if we can get a little better connection with you there. Bear with us, folks. Ramon, so we can't hear you right now.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, better. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, I wanted to thank FIU for having me and Dean Schreiner, Dr. Stack, as well as you. So it's a great honor to be here. So I apologize. I'm unfortunately in transit taking my parents to Connecticut. My mother and father are both elderly, and my mother has Alzheimer's. So it's something that we've been having to plan to do. So I apologize, but I also didn't want to miss the opportunity to have a great conversation. And really appreciate it. It's a real honor. Senior Vice President of Talent, my job is a broad job to think about who are the best artists in the world and how do we get them to CNN. That's the simple answer. And I think about that in terms of anchors, correspondents, journalists, digital journalists, executive producers, everyone that has something to do with editorial impact is my charge. So, incredibly honored. With me, obviously, but important to face
Ramon, sorry, we're having a little trouble again. It must be a rough patch on the connection. So hold on one second. Let's see if we can get a better connection here. Sorry, folks. All right, give it another shot. We're having a really rough patch. Bear with us here. Ramon, you still with us? I think we lost him, but all right, bear with us for those of you watching while we restore our connection with him. Hopefully we'll get him back in just a minute here. Sorry. Connection on trains is, I guess, a little more challenging than we thought it would be. Bear with us, folks. We might have him back. Is he there? Yeah, Ramon, I think, are you back? Can you hear me? And if you can, I can't hear you. All right, he's connecting his audio. Okay, thanks, Maria. Hang on there, everyone. We'll get him back on here momentarily.
Can you hear me?
Not too well, but give it a shot. Keep talking. No, Ray, you're in a bad zone right now, so hold on. I think we lost him, so hold on, everybody. Sorry. All right. Yeah, I was just gonna, thanks, Maria. Give us a moment here, folks who are watching, while we try to reconnect with him on a phone. Thanks for your patience. Okay, give us one more minute and all right, I think he's back on. He is. Ramon, let's give this one more shot. And if it doesn't work, I think we you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
That sounds better. Okay.
Okay, I dialed in on the phone, but I don't think I'm not on mute.
This
So-
sounds clearer. So go ahead. So you were describing what you do in your position. Why don't we just sort of pick up right from there?
Sure. I mean, I oversee all of the hiring of our talent across the world. My job is to think about who are the best and brightest for both on screen and behind the screen when it comes to journalism, right? Anchors, correspondents, all of the journalists and reporters in the organization, the executive producers and the news gathering executives. It's a broad responsibility. I got a great team, but really it's about thinking, how do we change the face of CNN to reflect and look like not just this country, but the world, because CNN really is the global leader in news. And if you're going to be the global leader in news, you have to look like the world. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that. As you know, some of you may know, I was the head of diversity and inclusion in addition to this role for several years. So diversity and inclusion is very near and dear to my heart since I was 6 years old and my mom taught me what that meant. So that's in a nutshell sort of my role. I also have a seat at the table in two ways. One, I'm responsible also for the development of our people. Once we hire them, I look after how they're doing in terms of performance and journalism. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how our reporters can be better writers and better reporters. Spend a lot of time around that and getting them coaching. I also lead all of our pipelining and our workshops throughout the company, both internally and externally. So those are big responsibilities that I have. I have a great team that supports me.
Great. And first, right up until the very end there, the connection did get much better. So thank you for sticking with us, Ramon, and my thanks to our viewers as well for hanging in there with us as we work through the communication issues. So thank you. You mentioned it's important for CNN to try to reflect how the world is, not just the country and its diversity. How do you think CNN is doing on that score?
I think it's been a fantastic. Year. CNN, in terms of the way we think about our audience and the way we think about our viewers and our readers, we have never had more viewers and more readers than we do now. These are the highest ratings and the highest in terms of television that we have seen in our history. And it's also the highest circulation in terms of what we see on the digital, in our digital readers. It's the highest we've ever seen. We are number one in every metric that you can imagine, in page views and time spent, in video downloads and video streams. So, I mean, it's been an absolutely amazing couple of years. But when you look at the metrics of the way we think about how people interact with us, we've never had more people watching us and reading us than at this very moment. So I think that bodes well for what the audience and our readers are saying about us. I also think we've entered a period over the last several years in which there has been a reawakening of civic mindedness. There's been a reawakening in democracy, certainly in this country, but I think also in the world's engagement. The world has gotten smaller. And I think CNN is an example of an organization that makes the world smaller. It connects cultures, it connects countries, it connects governments. I think our reporting has to focus in and around, not just what's going on in the U.S., but what is the impact around the world. And you've seen movements, obviously, during the Trump administration that could clearly be connected and reflected in places like Brazil, and places like Turkey, in places like Mexico. You could see all types of movements, even in Europe, when you start thinking about some of the Eastern Bloc countries, and even Great Britain. You could see all types of populist movements. So I think that's where CNN becomes very effective as a global journalism organization. Its ability to connect those dots, to show those relevancy that sometimes people may not see. And that's why you have to have a massive global footprint. We've also never had more reporters than we have now, never had more journalists than we have now. We've never had more bureaus than we have now. So I think when you add all that together, David, it's a pretty good argument that I don't think we've ever done the kind of work that we're doing today.
So you've been with CNN for nearly a decade. How from your vantage point, how has cable news changed over the years? And with it, how has your job changed over the years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that when you look at what's happening in the industry and what's happening in our profession, the word transformation is overused, but I don't think we've ever been in a more transformative period in my lifetime. I would imagine what it must have been like when television, came about from radio, and I think that we're living through those incredible times. What the internet and what the digital age and what streaming is doing has changed us dramatically. But I will tell you this: what hasn't changed in the last 10 years. The absolute need, desire, and demand of not only our society and democratic society, but societies around the world, of credible news and information that they can trust. And if there's one metric, David, if there's one metric or one measurement that we care about more than any other, it's not ratings, it's not revenue, it's the every year analysis we do about how trusted we are. And CNN continues to be the most trusted news organization in the country and in the world. And we measure that every year consistently. And so I think that has not changed. Making sure that I think what has changed is the proliferation of media throughout the world, the proliferation of platforms that media can be injected into societies has changed. And the proliferation of information via social media platforms, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, even TikTok, all the things that are happening, these are all delivery devices. But, a delivery device is only as good as what's in it. And we also know that delivery devices can spread misinformation, can spread untruths, can spread misleading information. So I think what's changed is a place like CNN becomes more valuable today than it was even 10 years ago or 5 years ago, because of all this chaos of information that people are left to sort of figure out on their own. Well, do I believe this? Do I not believe this? Is this true? Is this not true? Is this even journalism? One of the things I teach in the journalism class that I teach at FIU is what is journalism? And one of the questions is Facebook journalism? Is Twitter journalism? And, the answer that we go through as we go through the class is that it can be, but in and of itself, it's not. They're just platforms that anyone could come on and scream and yell whatever they want. So I think what has changed is the value of a place like CNN has gone way up because of the need for people to know the truth, turn to a place they can trust, turn to a place that can sort out the facts and can give them some clarity amidst all this confusion. And that was before a pandemic and before a race streaming. Add that in, and we've never been less there than we are now. I think that's what's changed. Clamoring and the need for a new innovation, I've ever been, and I think that's a big switch from where we were probably 10 years ago.
Okay, great. You're back. There was a slight fade there on your connection, but I think we're back. But let me just push you on this a little bit. And Dean Schreiner had also sent me a message about this. The confidence or trust that CNN enjoys. You say it's the highest rating of all the cable networks, but has it gone down? Have we seen an overall decline in trust and confidence in the media? But CNN maybe is still at the top of the pack. But have you seen a decline in that?
We haven't seen a noticeable decline for CNN. We have seen that there has been a decline because of the proliferation of the amount of sources. So there's confusion. And so I think that's one element, is there's confusion. I think secondly, the partisanship and the polarization has increased. There's no doubt about that. The partisanship and polarization has increased. And so when you start dicing and separating out sort of how different groups feel about media, you will see some differences than perhaps what we saw 10 years ago. And I think that mirrors the same changes we see just in general partisanship in the country. But where we stand very, very, I think, confident is that amidst all that, CNN still continues to maintain the same level of confidence in all of the studies we do that we have had for a long time. And that's something that we're really proud of and that we guard every day. And it is by far the most important metric and measurement that we care about.
Let me ask you about the way CNN approaches things, both CNN International and the domestic. And I used to travel a lot before the pandemic overseas and would catch CNN. But I think at least I have perceived a change where the network, and not just CNN, but relies heavily on panels. Some would say too heavily on panels, and not enough on actual reporters who break the news. So you'd have a segment where the anchor provides a brief description. Maybe you go to a reporter for a quick recap of what happened, but then the anchors quickly turn to a panel to discuss the subject rather than to dive more deeply into the reporting. Is that a fair criticism of the evolution?
I think it's a fair criticism of the cable news industry from a more macro perspective, but I do not think it's that fair a criticism of CNN specifically, because I think at CNN, if I go by specifically what I know about what we've been doing, we have hired more reporters now than at any time in our past. We actually have more reporters and more journalists on staff than at any given time in the entire history of the company, and by large measures. I just hired a race and equality team filled with reporters. I just hired a policing team filled with reporters. I just hired a climate team filled with reporters. I've added at least 5 to 7 White House correspondents and reporters. Same on Capitol Hill. Same on the Justice beat. Same on the health beat. There is not one area or sector of the beats that we cover that we haven't expanded. And what that means is, and those people aren't sitting around, they are doing more and more reporting. Now, at the same time, as the country became more polarized and the country began to really dig into all the different points of views that were crashing into each other, some better than others. There was also a need to make sure that we were representing those points of view. And I think there's something very important to point out here. There is a very big difference between editorial and reporting and opinion and point of view and analysis. Those are different buckets. But let me make it clear, those are all part of a journalistic enterprise. And we can go back to the beginning of our democracy when newspapers started, and the first newspapers, whether it was you were a supporter of Jefferson or you were a supporter of Hamilton, we already understood that there were separate points of view, and newspapers were going to build around those centerpieces. And you turn to the op-ed page and you turn to the different pamphlets that were published, and they would all be making their points of view. The modern version of that, you can certainly see a lot of times in prime time on cable news. It's a modern version of that come to life in television. And I think there's a place for that. But you have to be very clear on your distinction between that analysis and point of view and opinion and the reporting and the truth that needs to be done. At CNN, by the sheer numbers, we have more reporters than we've ever had. So I think that analysis is off. I would tell you, well, I'll leave it at that, David.
Well, so let me push you a little bit though, Ramon, if I can. If you watch during the day or if you go on CNN's website versus watching or tuning in at night, are you more likely to see all those reporters that you've hired during the day or on the website versus in the evening when you're more likely to see whether it's from Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett or others?
Sure.
You have a lot of people offering their opinions,
sure,
and expert views too.
And let me lay that out, because you cannot define CNN just by its primetime lineup, but its primetime lineup is incredibly important. But the primetime lineup has much more editorial page on it than other parts of the day by the nature of the way audiences consume. So here's what we know. What we know is that audiences throughout the day are really interested in what's going on. They turn to CNN either on television or through digital, and all the combination of the ways you can get CNN. And they are constantly checking and knowing, and it's an audience that very much wants to be fulfilled with a lot of information. That's why we need all those reporters. We're serving that need. We're feeding that need. And more importantly, we're telling people what we believe they really do need to know. When it comes time to prime time in the evening, what happens in television cable viewing, not the internet, not digital, not our apps, not what we're doing on social media, which is also definitive of who CNN is. But when we turn to cable prime time, just that specific part of our world, people know what has gone on. They are fulfilled with, I know what's happened today. I now want to participate and listen to some thoughts about it. So the change in what happens in cable news at that hour is more akin to talk radio, in the sense that people are interested in, I'd like to hear more about what we know about. Now, we have clearly in both 7 and 8 and 9, we have reporters that come in and will set the story up, and then we'll have some smart, is the goal, conversation and analysis on what that might mean. I think by the time you get to 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, most of the viewers know the story. What they want now is, tell me what it means to me, or tell me why it's important, and give me some analysis. And we try to be smart about the people that we hire to do that. But that once again is the nature of that portion of our company, which is cable news primetime viewing. Obviously, you turn to what's going on CNN on our app, or you go into CNN digital. These are places that get 2 million page views. So you're getting a story that gets 2 million readers versus on primetime cable, it might get, they might get 800,000 or 750,000. So I think it's important to put that into context.
Fair enough. And let me just say to our viewers, if any questions you have, you can send them in through the Q&A function. I'll do my best in the remaining time to raise them with Ramon. Let me ask you about 2 controversies before I turn to those questions. And I hope you haven't frozen. Just as I come to the controversies, your screen freezes, but let me give it a shot anyway. If you could, okay, I think we're back. One is, what responsibility does CNN have for remarks made by its paid contributors and analysts that maybe aren't on CNN's shows, but occur in other venues? And here that I have in mind in particular, the controversy involving Senator Rick Santorum and his remarks about Native Americans. What responsibility does the network have for things like that?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Darn. No,
yeah, exactly. I can see that. I can see the scenery moving, so don't pull that one.
Good. No, look, I think it's so important, once again, to reflect on understanding what the role of a columnist, a political commentator is versus that of a journalist. And clearly they are different species. They are different, they play different roles. I believe, and it's not, Rick Santorum has not just commented on this, but he also commented also in the past on some other issues that were very controversial and offensive. And so I think the issue here becomes, it's important to differentiate the difference between that columnist who comes in and gives a point of view, is appealing to his base, and not making a journalistic comment statement that is representative of the company in any way, shape, or form. With that said, there is no doubt that people need to be held responsible for what they say and what they think, off base or even offensive. I would say two things. One, I'm not involved in chatting and talking to him and analyzing him right now as to what's going to happen. That right now is being handled by, some other folks. So I can't tell you where that's going to land, but that is on those conversations are ongoing. And I'm not privy to them, so I can't comment on them. But what I can tell you is, in this particular case, as a former head of diversity and inclusion, and as very close to our head of diversity and inclusion, we have really worked on reaching out to the Native American community to sit down and have an open dialogue about this. To their thoughts on this, and we have those meetings actually going on. I had one this week. Our head of diversity and inclusion is having one next week, and we're going to get into that. I mean, we're going to listen. And so I would say stay tuned on this. But like I said, I think it's important to underscore that there is an element of, there are people that will come on to the editorial page in a newspaper, pretty reprehensible things. And it's important to understand that that does not represent the company. It does not represent the Washington Post, doesn't represent how we feel about this. But like I said, I am not right now involved in the discussions directly with Santorum. That's being handled by a couple of
Great. Okay, it faded again, hopefully, but we'll get there. There we go. Okay, you're back. No, I appreciate that, Ramon. Let me ask you, I have to ask you, this won't surprise you, about the latest controversy, although it's been percolating for a while, going back to the pandemic. And that, of course, involves Chris Cuomo when he was interviewing his brother, the governor, during the pandemic, and then the controversy about the allegations against his brother more recently. I realize, again, you may not be in the conversations about what may happen as a result of that, but is there a problem when you hire people or bring people on for their either anchoring or for their analysis when they do have these family ties that might pose some challenges? You don't want to penalize people because of whom they're related to, but at the same time, as we see, this sometimes can cause some problems. Sorry.
Of course. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, to your point, as journalists, we're human beings with relationships and families and all of those rose-colored glasses that we all bring to our own role. We have our own relationships and issues, and Chris, I can only tell you what Chris said. Chris last night addressed this and apologized for being in a situation that was difficult in terms of his relationship with his brother. He knows he apologized for it. Other than that, the conversation that he's having once in that conversation with him directly. So where that lands, we'll see. But I do know last night he went to he addressed the show that it's his brother, and he'll never be able to be objective about it, and he'll never be able to cover it in a way that anyone would say is objective, because it's his brother. And he admitted to that, and admitted that having a conversation with him was something that he wanted to apologize for. So look, I mean, that these things, as long as they just
Hold on there, Ramon. We're losing you again, I think. Hold on.
been fully disclosed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, maybe there you go. Yeah, I was gonna say turn out the video. Let's see if
I
that
think
works
he's always been, I think, very upfront about fully disclosing the relationship, and the fact that he can't, because it's his brother, take it for what it's worth, what I'm about to say.
So let me turn to a couple of questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. All right.
The connection again is a little hazy. So let me try this, Ramon. Let me bring in a question or two from our viewers, and then I have a final question asking you about advice you'd have for our students who aspire to become journalists. Hopefully, you're able to hear what I'm saying while doing this. Let me on this point. Let me just ask you. Peter Millian writes that the sense, at least his perception, is that CNN appears not to punish Cuomo, but sidelines Santorum. Should the goal be not to punish and give people a chance to overcome a bias or mistake and give them another chance, no matter what their politics? So he's wondering if there's, I think, to boil Peter's question down, is there a double standard? I think I know what your answer is going to be, but it's a fair criticism, or it's a criticism that's out there. Let me put it that way.
Sure, but these things are not at their, these are ongoing conversations taking place right now. So I can't speak to though that question has a conclusion in it that I don't think anyone has reached yet, or we can say has been reached. So I can't speak to that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Tell you what Chris said last night, and he apologized for it.
Betsy Skip writes and asks, how has the mission of CNN changed since its inception with Ted Turner's vision? I realize you haven't been there since day one, but how have you seen the mission evolve over the years?
Well, the way Dean Schreiner described my career, it seems like I've been here since the blue channel and the red channel and the invention of television. But thank you for Dean. It's interesting. I think the ultimate mission of CNN, when Ted Turner announced it 45 years ago, at the core of that mission is to serve the world, with 24 hours of news and information that you could trust. I think that mission still stands today. Amazingly, given think about what's changed in 45 years. I mean, think about what's changed in 5 years. So for that mission to still stand is, I think, pretty impressive and pretty incredible. And I when Ted Turner launched this, he was made fun of, right? It was chicken noodle news. It was, who on earth would ever think that a 24-hour news channel would work? And here we are. It is one of the most important and coveted news organizations and news brands in the world. And the beauty of this is that it serves us well, because there is one news organization that does seem to walk into a room anywhere in the world, and world leaders will pay attention. And so that's an important thing. And Ted Turner is an incredible pioneer and somebody that we every day thank for what he's done. I think what has changed is you know, we think about all the ways in which the audiences have transformed themselves, the way news and information needs to be accessible to people the way they want it. They want it individualized. They want it just for them. They want to be able to pick when and how they get it. So I think in that sense, we've had to become much more savvy about how the way people receive the news impacts the way we go out sometimes and cover it, or the technology we have to use, or the expertise that we have to teach people that they didn't have before. That's something that we think about all the time. Streaming is really going to change that, because, you know, from Netflix to HBO Max to Hulu and Amazon and all the rest, what it's done is it's made this next generation of news consumers far more savvy, far more high expectation about you knowing what they want, knowing their likes, all these algorithms and all the technology that creates predictive behavior. All those things are things that now, as journalists, you know, we think about. You know, it's just not going out and doing a story. It's how many elements of the story can I take and now find different and interesting ways to deliver that storytelling. That's a really exciting proposition. And I think that's what's changed dramatically. So you really are almost deconstructing stories in many ways when you go out and cover them. It's not just about going out. You know, when you first went out, you go out and you do the story, and here's the nut graph, and here's the who, what, when, where, why. Great. Now it's really about how do I take that interview and now do it in different ways so that it can serve so many different audiences through all the different platforms. How do we think of interactivity? How do we think of how do we rethink the interview? How do we get the audience involved in the interview process? How do we build more and more reporting around a story? Because in the streaming environment, the expectation of the audience will be they show up, here's one story, but here's the 7 other sidebars. So in that sense, David, it creates a lot of excitement around the expansion of reporting. That's why we've hired so many people. Because if you're going to do a story on, you know, what's going on with immigration on the border, there's going to be a big expectation that in addition to that story, there's going to be 7 other sidebars that might really be fascinating or interactive. There might even be a docuseries that we've done. There might even be a movie documentary that goes along with it. All of that has to be thought through. And it creates a really exciting environment. I think that's the big change from where we were 45 years ago. Now we're really trying to hire people who think about these things in those ways, if that makes sense.
Yep. Let me squeeze in 2 more questions, Ramon, and then we'll let you continue on your train ride. Alan Richards from FIU notes that TikTok recently launched a campaign called Fact Check Your Feed to provide their viewers with skills to critically engage content. Because of the proliferation of misinformation on certain cable news stations, do you think there is room on CNN to provide the public with similar media literacy skills in addition to reporting and calling out misinformation?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the power of journalism is that you're hiring people that come to the table who will provide a critical analysis and you know, the definition of journalism that I teach in the FIU class is it's a current reason reflection of society's events, values, and needs. That skill set is what separates journalism from everything else. It's what separates us from Facebook and internet and anyone on the corner that can just scream out and yell things. You know, yes, but I think that's our value. So I don't mean, and I don't think that we should allow that value to be usurped by anyone, meaning that that's the hard work we have to do. So in terms of literacy and teach, you know, I think there's been a lot of literacy around democracy in the last 5 years. I think there's been a lot of literacy around technology and things of those natures and things of that nature. We have employed you know, we have some incredible, you know, Daniel Dale, who we brought in to really do some of that, lead the team around that work, has really been important for us. We have also hired a tremendous team on the media team. Donnie O'Sullivan, Sarah Seidner, Elle Reeve are some of our reporters who are very different than some of the reporters that you would see 10 years ago. And these are reporters who have drilled into the world of 8chan and 4chan and the QAnon movement and the sources of misinformation, the evolution of misinformation, that is very complicated stuff and requires a current reason reflection applied in a journalistic way. Now, do we believe that the audience can become more sophisticated and aware of those things? Yes, we think so by the reporting. But to suggest that we should go out there and they can become their own fact checkers, yeah, that'd be great. But that's why a CNN is around. That's why we hope they turn to us. I would love, it's hard enough. We have a very important role at FIU and other universities and colleges and newspapers and TV organizations to develop the next generation of fact checkers, storytellers, people who hold the powerful accountable. That is very hard work, and it's hard work that requires, I think, real thought, critical thinking skills, and analysis. So it's not my intention to besmirch the audience that they can't do that. But I think the more and more, I think we lead by example. I think we lead by breaking stories. And, just this last week, we've broken several stories now on the issue of, Trump and the insurrection. We have been very, very focused on the insurrection issues. We broke that it's becoming a criminal investigation. And so, those are the things that I think illuminate and educate and hold the powerful accountable. I think that audiences over the last 4 to 5 years have become a lot more savvy, a lot more engaged, a lot more civic minded, and are interested in these things. I don't know if that answers Alan's question,
that does. No, I appreciate that. So Ramon, let me wrap up our session with a question that I've asked the two previous individuals that we've interviewed for this, and we'll ask this of every guest we have for this media series. And we have a School of Communications, we have aspiring journalists among the FIU student body. What advice would you give aspiring journalism students out there? And what are you looking for in recruiting for talent?
Sure. Once again, thank you for having me and for your tough questions. And I want to apologize. This was not meant on purpose so that I would evade your questions, because clearly
Understood.
I did not evade your questions. And it was great. I really appreciate the tough questions. That's it meets the whole standard of what we're here for, which is journalism, right?
Appreciate it.
Look, I care a lot about this question and its answer, and I talk about it a lot in the classes I teach at FIU, and all the journalism schools I travel to, and schools around the world. It's very, very basic for me, but it's everything. The most important issue is critical thinking skills. And if you ask me what's the second thing, I'd say critical thinking skills. If you ask me the third thing, I'd say critical thinking skills. The ability to sort of, and so what I mean by that is there's a couple elements to it. Critical thinking skills mean you have a DNA for learning. You are a constant and lifelong learner. You are a voracious consumer of news and information yourself, and that consumption is a diverse subset of things you pursue. It shouldn't just be the New York Times and CNN. When I talk to people and they say, well, I read the New York Times, I watch CNN, I go, that's it? Yep. Well, that's not a good diet.
Yeah.
And I think your diet should be across the spectrum. It should include things that you personally disagree with. It may be things that you don't have the same political thoughts or share. You should be really seeking a rich and diverse set of nutrients for your brain and your journalism. And it should also include things that you're passionate about and things that you don't know anything about, right? I grew up not really knowing a lot about the world of finance and economics. And to me, for many years, it was a blind spot. And I learned over time, tackle your blind spot. Tackle the area where you're just like, well, geez, I don't really like that. That's a good sign for all of you journalists out there. Tackle it. So I got to tell you, I think it's the biggest shortcoming that we continue to see across the board in journalism is people not being prepared. When I do an analysis of our executive producers and senior leaders, hiring people, the same thing they say to me. People are not have to be prepared. And what we heard is, can I have a conversation with you about the insurrection? Can we talk to me about what you know about the Ukraine? Can we have a conversation about Brazil? Can we talk about the Olympics? Can we talk about the local community in Miami? What's the big issue going on at FIU? Do you have some thoughts, some original ideas? So I would tell you that is issue 1, 2, and 3. After that, you're the ability to express yourself, either in the written word or in the oral word. Right? Your ability to express yourself through writing, and you know, taking these great thoughts and then turning them into journalism through your writing skills. So certainly writing, and whether it's writing for television or writing for print or digital, you know, but that's built on the first few weeks.
Hey, Ramon, maybe turn off your video for a second. We're in a rough patch here. Hold on, everybody. Well, yes, I think so. Yeah, go ahead.
So
Hey, sorry, Ramon. No, it's breaking up again. Maybe just turn off your video if you can, and we'll try to wrap it up without it.
there you go. Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. Yep.
All right. Can you hear me, David?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So I talk about 3 pillars: the cultural literacy piece and the DNA of learning. That's sort of your first pillar. Your second pillar is writing and storytelling. And then the third pillar is really sort of the creativity and presentation and if you're in television, you know, presentation and performance, that's for the television people. So, but it's really those first 2, and that leads to your ability to enterprise and come up with your own story ideas. So those would be the two that I care about the most, are that critical thinking skill and your ability to write. I mean, those 2 are, in my opinion, indispensable for great journalism.
Let me just ask you in closing, just one quick question, because as you know, a lot of the students here at FIU are bilingual, at least, if not able to speak more than 2 languages. Ability in foreign languages other than English?
I think any ability, anything that creates any level of expertise in anything is wonderful for journalism. So knowing 2 languages more than you know, instead of 1 is better. 3 is better, right? Knowing about not just politics but economics is better than just knowing about one thing. I'm a big believer in beats and expertise and investing in really following your passion and knowing things. So yes, and for FIU students, you know, definitely that bilingualism or trilingualism is a huge asset. I just want to add one more thing, David, and that is to everyone listening. We didn't really get into this much, but understanding how diversity and inclusion and equity are actual journalistic tools and not societal tropes or, you know, or some sort of politically correct concepts. Yes, they can be those things. But those things, when they become that, it's someone who doesn't quite understand what it really means. Diversity and inclusion have to be part of journalism, the way accuracy is part of journalism. We would never go into a newsroom and say, hey, I think we're going to try to be accurate today. Let's go for it. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. No one would ever say that. Same thing with diversity and inclusion. It should not be used in a way that, well, that's something we'll do later and hopefully we'll achieve it. When you're not being diverse, when you don't have diversity and inclusion in the people that you hire and the stories that you cover, you are not reflecting the world accurately, and that is journalism malpractice. And I would just say to all the journalists here that that's your responsibility, and it has nothing to do with whether you're a person of color or not, because diversity isn't just people of color. We're all diverse. We all come from different places and different socioeconomic backgrounds and different geographies, and we're different ages. And there's so many different degrees and elements of diversity. And so we're all responsible. So if you're going to have a conversation about education, ask yourself, who's in the room? If you're going to have a conversation about immigration, who's in the room and who's missing? And I think this is a big crisis right now in journalism that continues. I'm fighting very hard. It's one of my passions in life. Is you all have a responsibility to make sure that if someone's not in the room that should be, go and find that person. Go and be part of that. You wouldn't go out and do a story and not get a quote from someone who's appropriate to you, but we do this all the time. So I know some of you don't have the power to make the decision about who's in your newsroom. I fortunately do, and I've spent my life on this, and now we're at 40% people of color on air at CNN, more than any other TV company. And behind the scenes, we're also making tremendous strides and have had more people of color there now. So I just want to urge everyone on this call and everyone who can hear my voice, despite the trains, that this is your responsibility too. And the world that we live in demands it of us. If we're going to serve the world and we're going to serve our community, we have to look like it, and that's on us. So Drew, David, thank you for letting me do that. And Brian and John and David, thank you for having me.
Ramon Escobar, CNN's Senior Vice President for Talent Recruitment and Development. I can see why FIU is very fortunate to benefit from your insights with your engagement with our students, and you've been very gracious in joining us here today during a train ride with your folks. You're a good son, clearly. That is important to do, and I wish you and your folks a very safe journey. Very grateful for you joining us here today. This has been a great way to continue this series.
They say thank you.
There we are. Okay, right back at you. Terrific. I love it.
They say thank you, and I look forward to obviously working with FIU in the years to come, despite this grilling today. But that was well done.
Appreciate it.
I'm honored to follow, obviously, legends like Marty and Monica, who has her hands full there with her new gig in Miami after coming from Atlanta. So they're two great journalists to follow, and I hope I lived up to it. So thanks for having me.
Did indeed. And next month, by the way, just for our viewers, we have Matt Kaminsky, the editor-in-chief of Politico, joining us. I think it's June 25th, but we'll have an announcement going out for that. Ramon, sincere thanks. Really appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt the trip, but safe journey onward.
I'll send you some questions for Kaminsky.
Please do. Please do. All the best.
Okay.
Thanks again. And thanks to all of you for joining. This has been the partnership between the School of Communications and the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs here at Florida International University. I'm David Kramer. We'll see you next time. Thank you.